tell you that I am sincerely humbled this evening to get the key of the village of Mariemont. I mean, that's truly humbled. And I also want to point out that Mayor Dan Policastro and Joe Stelzer are the real heroes here. So I want to give you some background, tell you where we've come, where we are today, and talk a bit about the future as well. As many of you know, last summer, not this past summer, the summer before, summer 2012, Mayor Dan Policastro requested that the University of Cincinnati come to Mariemont, look at the South 80, and see if there were any archaeological evidence of people having lived in that area in the past that may be of national significance, perhaps something that could be placed on the National Register of Historic Places. Well, I offer a course called Public Archaeology. It's modeled after the Innocence Project at the University of Cincinnati, where they evaluate the guilty or innocence of someone who's currently in prison. So we work with communities who are facing some type of destruction to potential historic resources. And the class, my primary student, Joe Schaefer, graduate student, did the essentially supervision of the project. We had an undergraduate crew. We had a large body of students there working through the Department of Anthropology and in cooperation with the village of Mariemont. And the area, of course, that we're interested in, you can see highlighted here, and with closer, the Mariemont Gardens Park in the lower 80. This was our focus. This area actually was on the National Register of Historic Places, and somehow ODOT was able to remove it. Now, currently is part of the Mariemont National Landmark District, so it's preserved there. But this was another tier of preservation, and we're still not sure how or why that was done. What was alarming to me is that there are 4 major plans in terms of putting the highway, and by the way, we call it the Eastern Corridor, but through documents that the Sierra Club was able to get in Columbus, we found out that it's actually called the Eastgate Project, and it's Eastgate Mall that's pushing for it to come through. And if you've been out there, you know it's already started. They've already started construction. This is the area they've targeted, and from an engineering and geological standpoint, the South 80 is their best route, going right up against Miami Bluff, and that drew a major concern. So from August to November in 2012, many of you came out and helped. It's great to have you. Many of you came out and helped. What we started out in a humble way, we started digging little holes throughout. We partitioned. This is an aerial photo of the South 80. And these are areas we targeted. And each one of these dots represents a miniature excavation. I know many of you saw the larger excavation, but may not have realized how many holes we actually dug down there. We spent a great deal of time. And one area we focused on in particular, if you're at Midway, if you go to Midway on Miami Bluff and climb up on the serpentine earthwork and look straight down, you're looking at where the village site was. This is where the red dot is where we first discovered, and honestly, we spent months finding nothing. And then all of a sudden, we hit the mother lode. This was the day, this was the artifact. We realized, I know it doesn't look like much, but that's an arrowhead that dates to the 17th century. Arrowheads, and it's a true arrowhead, change through time, just like tombstones or buildings change through time. And of course, this generated great publicity. And then we decided to focus on between December and May, and yes, we were even out there in the snow, very diligent to get some idea of the extent of the site and exactly what kind of site was located. Many of you, again, cold weather, we had to thaw the earth quite a few times. Nevertheless, this is a map of our excavations. We had one large area we targeted, but what we ended up finding, you see those little lines, those are the limits of an extremely large Fort Ancient house. It's probably based on the kinds of artifacts. It was probably what we would call a men's house. Algonquian-speaking people such as the Shawnee had men's houses and women houses. Women have their own ceremonies separate from men. And this looks like what we're dealing with. Here's some of the post molds. Here's a schematic that was drawn on the site, cross section. And here you can see where the chaining pin is. The archaeological layer is that dark band right by the chaining pin there going across. And here's a close-up of it. You see that kind of orangish color. That's literally house debris. And to give you some idea, in the time we excavated more than 9,000 artifacts. That's remarkable in that small area, 9,000 artifacts. The largest proportion of which are animal remains. And those are very valuable because they tell us what time of year the site was occupied. The next is lithic materials, but although it's less than 1%, the fact that we found historic European trade goods, again, helps reinforce the time period. And botanical remains gives us seasonality. Just give you some idea, a variety of freshwater mussels, white-tailed deer, wild turkey, turtle, a variety of fish, black bear, wolf, beaver, and very important at this time period was a little ice age to have bison there as well. Absolutely a remarkable assemblage. This is a mandible or lower jaw of a young bison that was recovered. This very well may have been dispatched from ambush at Big Bone Lake State Park. We have some geochemical ways of comparing. One of the remarkable finds, this is charred maize. Now, if you look at scale, the cobs were only the finger of my small finger, or my index finger. But that's how big corn was at that time period, which is another indicator of the age. We found a plethora of arrowheads that date to this time period in various states of manufacture. And we found a variety. On top row, third from the left, that's an antler tine that was actually used to flake stone. That's a flint knapper's toolkit, basically. What we found. We found a discoidal, knives. It's a remarkable toolkit. And of course, the ceramics are identical to those found at the nearby Madisonville site, which is 500 meters away at the current location of the Mariemont swimming pool. And in terms of non-local artifacts, artifacts whose origins was not here in Mariemont, this is called an Oneota potsherd. It also dates to the 17th century. The closest location where that would have come from is the Illinois River Valley. So that shows there's direct contact between this area and the Illinois River Valley. Again, making it a very, very significant site. What really was remarkable, and this tells us there's a European presence at the site. On the left is a piece of trade copper, that's French trade copper, probably voyageurs along with the Jesuits. That orange and blue piece of glass, that's actually a glass bead that was made in Venice, the kind that the Jesuits and also the voyageurs traded. And the two pieces on the right that's heavily crazed, that's glazed French earthenware, again dating to the 17th century. And in terms of give you some idea where you see the star, where the site is located, and the other dots are contemporary sites of that time period in the adjacent Little Miami River Valley. In terms of age, well, thanks to Mariemont, we were able to obtain an accelerator mass spectrometry radiocarbon date that tightly places it in the 17th century. In terms of significance, well, further investigation is warranted. And although you don't see us out there digging, we are investigating it. The other thing is, there's a great deal of integrity in the site, which demands future protection of the site. And in terms of, it's temporally and spatially related to the Madisonville site and Mariemont, which is, it's one of the most significant archaeological sites in all of eastern North America. And the reason for that, we know the Shawnee were living there at historic contact. And also the site occurs at a period when Europeans are showing up, great social cultural change, but it's also the time period of what we call the Little Ice Age, climatic change as well. Here you can see the Wainema site relative to the Madisonville site, although our recent investigations discovered that's not the true. 2 weeks ago, we went out and cored in between the railroad tracks, and the site extends under the railroad tracks, probably underneath the pavement as well, in that parking lot. But the other thing we did, we examined all the way to the railroad trestle 2 weeks ago, and the site continues all the way to the railroad trestle. So it's as the newspaper reported, it's larger than Nicker Stadium. And the interesting thing is, if ODOT would have sent out their archaeologists, and they are working in the valley, they would have missed it. They would have missed it if we had not used the techniques that we did. In terms of future directions, what we have, we do want to continue surveying it. I'm cautious right now at doing any more immediate excavations because I'm afraid if we dig too much, ODOT may say, well, you've already excavated it. It's okay to put it through. You've already done the mitigation for us. So, nevertheless, what we do have in works right now, in conjunction, and the forms are already at the Cincinnati Preservation Office, we want to create one of the largest archaeological districts in the state of Ohio. This is the plan. The black squares are the existing National Register nomination. And you can see this, what looks like a square in the center, but has a corner lopped off. ODOT did that. So, and they didn't expect us to go out and find sites. And you can see in the lower area, you can see the Madisonville site, the Mariemont earthwork, and the recently discovered Wainema site. So our idea, and we've been working all through the summer. ODOT tried to stop us several. They played dirty politics, but one of the things we've done the paperwork, and it's going to be submitted by the Cincinnati Preservation Association, who's had more success in nominating and having successfully created National Register districts. Again, politically, we can't say we're building a historic dam across the valley. I can't say that. What we're trying to do is preserve the sites, but if that happens, well, too bad. And here we were, this is what we were doing out here a couple weeks ago using, this is called dual flux gradiometry. It's a cesium magnetometer and a proton magnetometer, and this allows us to see into the ground without digging. So it's this kind of work that we've continued to do as recently as last week. I want to thank the volunteers, but especially the Mariemont Preservation Foundation who funded the dating of that site. So I want to stop here and let Mary Lou come up and raise the screen, if you will. Mary, would you like to raise the screen? There's a button right on the. There we go.
absolutely stunning model, and I couldn't have done a better job, so thanks so much, Jan. And then I want to thank Marge Carroll. Marge? She last but not least is the Robbins family. Do you stand up? I've never seen 3 kids have more fun pretending that they were Indians than these. We, on a hot summer day, their mom Amy brought them over, and we dressed them up like Indians, and they were Indians for the whole 2 hours we did the photo shoot. I've never seen 3 kids have more fun.
55 degrees out.
Really? But I don't think they even noticed.
No.
So anyway, saying that, now I'll tell you a little bit about this painting. When Dan asked me to do this, I was thinking of a painting about this big, and something a lot simpler. But before I started, I had breakfast at the Exemplar with Ken. And he started talking about this Indian village and all the things that were in it. And I started realizing this was going to have to be a lot bigger painting, because there was really nothing I wanted to leave out. I mean, what was I going to leave out? Up here is Miami Bluff, and here's the serpentine wall that these women, who were, by the way, the engineers of Native Americans, the women were the brains and the men were the brawn, right, Ken? So they were wonderful, and they were great engineers, and for centuries they built that mound, that serpentine mound that runs through Mariemont and was completely intact to this day, almost 3,000 feet of serpentine wall. And so I couldn't leave that out. So then I couldn't leave out these guys. These are the first French traders that came in the 1600s, and that started changing everything in history. They started trading all kinds of weapons, knives, and muzzle loaders, and even iron pots and utensils, and fabric, the first fabric. Because before that, all the Indian women knew what grasses and things to get to weave fabric to make their clothing. So that started changing everything, so I couldn't leave them out. And I couldn't leave out this lady who was smoking fish on the line. scare away the wildlife that would be trying to get into the garden to eat the food in the garden. And so these are passenger pigeons that are now extinct, but back then I'm sure they were quite pesky in the gardens. And I wanted to humanize it too. So here's a little girl in the garden. That's little Katie. And she's got her thumb in her mouth and she's holding on to her mother's skirt because I thought, you know, even back then, centuries ago, wouldn't little girls and little boys be sucking their thumbs? Of course they would. So again, that is finger. And what? Oh, the finger. Yeah, the finger. Yeah, Jack, thank you. He's my expert. And then these are Carolina parakeets. And they're up here in this tree too. They were here in abundance, the only native parakeet to the United States. And they were absolutely beautiful. I actually saw some of the study skins down at the museum center, and they're just extraordinary in their bright colors. They are now extinct, became extinct in 1918, but back then they were in great abundance. They were everywhere. And some of the early journals said that the Indians enjoyed them almost as if they were pets. They were very tame. So I couldn't leave them out. I had to put the Carolina parakeet in. Here's a father and son flint napping and making some of those arrowheads that Ken found. And down here is a mother and a daughter and a little sister. And they're making pottery from clay that they've gotten from the river. And the big sister's helping the little sister. And these are the kind of things, even though this is a long time ago, there's certain things that are just human that they would have been doing then just as we do now. And so I wanted to humanize it and hopefully people can relate to it, that even though these people lived a long time ago, in many ways they were very much like us. And the main thing I wanted to show was that this village, everybody, young and old, any age, everybody had their role to play in the survival of the village. Everybody was important and had something important that they did in the village. And it kind of reminds me of Mariemont today, where we have everybody pulling together here in the village and the village allies who are determined to fight this eastern corridor. I see the same kind of determination and everybody pulling together here just like then. So I think that speaks very much to what's going on here. So thank you very much.
Do we have any questions for Mary Lou? Wow, do we have any questions for Dr. Tankersly?
Yeah, I did have one question about what the current thinking is of the purpose of the serpentine mounds that are found throughout this area, both here and we've got the rather large ones that are a little further east.
Actually, this one's larger.
Is it?
Yeah. There's serpent mounds, serpentine earthworks, and stoneworks in every state in the United States, including Alaska and Hawaii. In this area, in fact, Mary Lou, if you look at her earring, she has a number of serpents. And what's interesting, the ones she's wearing are almost identical to those excavated at the Madisonville site, where the current site of Mariemont swimming pool. There's serpents engraved on the bone artifacts at the Madisonville site. There's serpentine copper ornaments. There's serpentine jewelry. And then you have the serpentine earthwork. It's my speculation alone. A lot of people don't realize you can tell basically when you look at Algonquian-speaking people, at one time, people we know today as the Anishinaabe or Ojibwe, the Delaware, the Miami, and the Shawnee were all one people. They all speak the same language. We don't know exactly when in time they broke apart and became the tribes we have today. But one thing they all have in common, Algonquian-speaking people have snake clans. In other words, Chuck, what clan are you?
Wolf.
Chuck Wolf clan,
Here.
your Heron clan, Turkey clan. We belong to clans, and men and women can't be in the same clans. But at this time period, in the 17th century, Algonquian-speaking people lived in villages that were all one clan. Clans are families. Algonquian-speaking people are patrilineal. In other words, they trace their family roots through their father's family, which is different than Cherokee, which they're matrilineal, trace their family through the mother's side. So one thought is that this is a snake town, a Shawnee snake town. But we also know, you think about today, you have the lower 80 is a great place to garden. But I don't know how many of you have gardens down there, but you have modern agricultural implements. These people did not. They had shell, they had bone, they had wood, antler to dig in the soil. Try to break the floodplain with those kind of tools. One of the things you have up on, those of you who live along Miami Bluff and the surrounding area, you know your soil's very sandy. That's a sand called loess. Loess is the most fertile soil on the planet. The Yellow River of China, it's yellow because of the loess. However, it's also drought prone. It doesn't hold, when water hits it, it drops right out. But the other thing is, a lot of you may not realize, is Miami Bluff used to be a ditch. Back when this area was actually called Madisonville. Madisonville used to go to all the way to the Little Miami River. And Charles Metz in 1878 interviewed the oldest living residents who were in their 90s, 1878. And they said that earthwork had always been there, as well as the ditch which parallels it. So what happened was, the ditch was there, it was something easy to pave, and that created Miami Bluff. That's why it parallels the earthwork. So there's a very good possibility this is a water management feature. But the idea of duality, serving water management for raising crops, but more importantly as a symbol for the people who live there. So that's what I think is going on. Great question.
Other questions?
Mary Lou,
Yes.
it wasn't much of a stretch to see the use of the big sycamore like that, because down upstream on the Little Miami, near what is now Livingston Lodge, there was a huge sycamore that some of the early white settlers lived in until they built their home. And they were millers along the river there.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Uh-huh.
And I've heard that there were some along the Ohio River that were so large that people could put their horses, stable them in there at night. And one man even had a blacksmith shop in one of the sycamores. But eventually they were all torn down when the riverboats came through. They needed the wood, and so they eventually cut them all down as fuel for the riverboats.
In the process of the flooding and draining and so forth, eventually the large sycamore down there by the lodge was gone, but it was inhabited by a family, and I think they had 3 children. 5 of them lived inside the tree that was down there.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yes. Julia is a former president of the Indian Hill Historical Society, so he comes from a very good source. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Dave, let everyone know, Mary Lou will stay. We have quite a few of the numbered signed prints right over there. If anyone wants to buy one, we'll have Mary Lou over here double signing it for you. If you forgot to bring a check, they're $95. If you're from Mariemont, I'll give you credit. But we do want to sell these.
Remember, it's Italian.
Even if you're not, we'll find out who you are. But, come on over and my way. Thanks.
Also, we still have tickets for the and then also calendars, so lots of opportunity to spend money. Unless anybody has anything else, we'll adjourn, and I just wish you all a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year's and Happy Holidays. And see you in February.